Hello everybody, thanks for coming back. I have to continue right now with my previous episode, which was about a slave owner in Canada. Her name is Ennevor, is her last name. Her and her whole family came here some years ago, and she made a very fortuitous meeting. She had one with a senior biologist at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and she managed to get herself into the University of British Columbia, compliments the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and began a Bachelor of Science degree, and then continued with a master's degree. So she spent, to my knowledge, she told me all these things herself, by the way. It's all personal knowledge that I have here. She went to the University of British Columbia and studied biology, chemistry, for 4 years to get a Bachelor of Science degree, 2 years for the master's degree, and all of it was paid for by a company called Temporarily Yours, which is under contract to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Her fortuitous meeting with the senior biologist level 4, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, was extraordinary, in my opinion. However, she brags about the fact that she made more money work as a full-time student at the University of British Columbia than she ever did working for J.O. Thomas, an associate, who is a contractor to the Crown, and I worked for him for approximately 7 years. I became a manager of a relatively, well, it was at that time the world's largest biological test. Anyway, let's get back to Ms. Ennevor. When I worked with her at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as I said, she had Indian blood on her hands, so the department hid her at Lillooet. I worked on the lower Fraser River. I had a team of people who were monitoring the Aboriginal catch. At that time, well, we started with sockeye and it went right through to chum salmon into November, I believe. Anyway, I was collecting scale samples. I made sure everybody has their report logs. I had to have them every day or every 2 days. I've forgotten now exactly which it was. I had a small car, a Volkswagen at the time, and I was going up and down the highway. I did a lot of mileage, and I didn't get paid for my mileage. The department made sure I wasn't getting my money. I also did not get paid overtime. I've taken it to court, and the judge looks at me, and they look at the clock, and they look back at me, and they can't believe I'm still there. So the judge, the Crown hasn't shown up. I don't see a Crown lawyer here to defend Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So the judge gives the Crown an extra 30 days. The judge did that to me twice. I went to look at my file. My lawyer friend who was helping me trying to get paid, he says, we got to go see your file. So we go to see the file at registry office on Howe Street at the law, where the law courts are. The judge didn't put his decision into my file. On 2 occasions, he didn't do it. I questioned the man there. I said, well, why doesn't the judge put his decision in here? He says, a judge in Canada does not have to do anything. He said, it is up to me to hire a court recorder, and that recorder, if they are registered with the court as a verified recorder, puts it in my file. Well, why is there, when I'm in the courtroom, why is there a woman there that's recording everything and making notes? Why can't I get that? He says, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So now you got to leave. My lawyer friend and I are walking out. My lawyer friend says, this is impossible. That is not what happens. But anyway, he blew me off. He wanted to blow me off so I couldn't find justice. I couldn't protect my ability to make a living. And that's how we do it in Canada. In fact, there are 45,000 cases unheard in Canada. The judges of Canada have been told not to hear them by the government of Canada. And our new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, says it's because Canada cannot afford it. Well, that's interesting. Justin Trudeau will tell you that Canada is the greatest country in the world. We have the most freedoms. We have the most rights. That's total crap. If you ever go into the courtrooms of Canada, I've been there many times, my God, there's no justice there. I've been on the phone to lawyers through the Law Referral Service. I had one woman lawyer. I record my calls when I talk to people like that because you got it, right? I mean, I'm paying for it anyway. One woman lawyer said to me, she says, Mr. Wheaton, there are no laws in Canada. I laughed. I thought she was making a joke, like when Justin Trudeau punches out a woman in Parliament or swears at people using the F word, dropping the bomb as often as he likes, or beating up an Indian in a boxing ring, or beating up Canadians in a bar, which he used to do. And I'm not sure how he ever got to be Prime Minister. I don't understand it. He's a very violent person. However, Justin Trudeau says Canada can't afford this justice. We just can't afford it. So what that means is, of course, that the people who work for the government of Canada may do whatever they want to the public and will suffer no ill effect. In fact, if they save money for the government of Canada, they are rewarded with a bonus. I am right now after a contractor, and I've asked under the Privacy Act and access to information. I've spoken to people on the phone. They call me and I record their calls. It's been months now. I don't have a response. They have 30 days to respond. It's been months. I have to chase these people again. This is the way we do it in Canada. We have to chase the government because they're lying to us and they're taking our money. So anyway, I want to get back to Bridget Ennevor here for a minute, because I wouldn't pay the bribe she demanded of me. I wouldn't pay it. And that was just for an interview. And there's a lot of people at that table who were having lunch. She demanded this bribe. It's a 40-ouncer of Jamaican rum made by Appleton Estates, 151. She was celebrating the death of Michael Manley, whom she called a communist. Now, fellow biologists are here. Francis Dixon is here, the area manager. Ken Wilson sitting right across from me, the man I work with directly. Neil Schubert is on my right. Bridget Ennevor is right across from him. They live together. I helped them move in together. There's one person from the Department of Environment here. She's a biologist as well, Francis Dixon, and a woman named Marilyn Joyce. We're all at the same table. She's demanding a bribe. I wouldn't talk. And Neil Schubert leans over to me and says, I don't think he's going to buy you the rum. She said, Terry, if you don't buy the rum, you don't work anymore. I've interviewed, I need to interview you next. I've interviewed 3 people for the job. You're next. I said, listen, I have won the competition. She says, well, not in my book, you didn't. The man that awarded me and Francis Dixon, they're both at this table. They know I won the competition. I beat out 2 other people because nobody wanted to work with the Indians. I'm quoting Ken Wilson. Nobody here wants to work with the Indians. In fact, Ken Wilson never worked for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for more than 2 years as a biologist. He always quit because he hated the job. I asked him. He and I used to be friends. I've been at his house. I've broken bread with him. I've drank beer with him. Neil Schubert, Al McDonald. Oh, I left out Al McDonald. He's at this table too. There's like 8 people here. So anyway, Bridget Ennevor fired me. I never worked again. I wouldn't pay the rum. So, you know, that's the way it is with slave owners. That's how slave owners operate. Michael Manley freed the slaves of Jamaica, and she's calling him a communist. And she was going to celebrate his death on that weekend. Celebrating the death. This is a woman who is a guest in my country. She's a human rights abuser. Her whole family are human rights abusers. They've killed more people, more black people than you and I have probably ever met. I've listened to her stories about the plantation. If you've ever seen the movie Django, that's the way it went down in Jamaica too. It's the same. So here we are, back at this. I'm sorry to talk fast, but I'm going past my time limit, so I'm going to continue to talk fast if I can. Anyway, I never worked again, of course. I managed to get a job with my old employer, Jim Thomas, up in Prince Rupert. That's where I conducted the world's largest biological test. I kept applying for work at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and I eventually got a job at a harbor as a dock attendant. So I went there, and I worked for a few weeks, and then Bridget Ennevor found out that I was working. So she came to the harbor, brought Neil Schubert with her, and her dog Milo, which is a big mouth dog, you know, those ones that you're supposed to not have around young children because they'll eat them. She came to the harbor. I'm working. They see me. We have a brief, but loud, conversation. The volume was up. She went into the office. The office manager's name is Robin Richardson, and I had a contract. I had a contract with them that in 3 months, after my 90 days, I get a $3 an hour raise. I signed it. He signed it. He's representing Small Craft Harbors, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So, after their little chat, my $3 an hour raise disappeared. I got no raise. So I complained. And you know what happens in Canada when you get to be a whistleblower about abuses and stuff like that? Canada decides to destroy you. That's what Canada does. We shouldn't, but it continues on to this day. However, everybody else got a between $1.50 and $2.50 an hour raise. I didn't get a raise, so I continued to complain. About 30 days later, a fisherman who's now deceased came up to me and he says, "We have decided you deserve 98 cents an hour raise." They wanted to make sure it wasn't even $1, because they're really angry that they broke the contract with me, and I went to court over it, and the judge totally supported breaking a contract. There's no contract law in Canada. We don't have any. They have it in the United States, contract law. They got contract law in England. Canada doesn't have contract law. If the judge says you don't have it, you don't have it. In Canada, the judges have all the rights of Canadians in their hands, and they will do what they will with you. And if they can save money for the government of Canada, they get a bonus in their paycheck. Pierre Trudeau used to call it the dark side of excellence. Now, I don't know if this is at the time, he may have gotten this idea from Star Wars, you know, when you had the good side, or the light side maybe, the dark side, we all know who he is. Sorry. Anyway, then off we go to court again, and the judge, he can't believe I'm standing there. I'm self-represented. They hate you. I'm going to use that word because I think it's true. And in Alberta, there's a woman judge who, when she was addressing the second-year class of law students in the courtroom, she said, "I am in the ivory tower. And the self-represented who come before me are the riffraff." And she was totally serious. I mean, she's under investigation now because the judiciary of Canada they don't want this information out. But it's quite true. We have other judges, you know, rape cases, and the judge will say, to the woman who got raped, the judge will say, "Well, why didn't you just keep your knees together? What's wrong with you?" "Well, it's because she's got a knife in her throat, and she can't see out of one eye because somebody beat the hell out of it. And the people that raped her are not, they're of an ethnic origin that really you got to be careful with because they all vote as a bloc. And if you piss off one of them, all the votes for the politicians may go in a different direction now." It's a little problem we have in Canada because I remember when we had a Prime Minister named Brian Mulroney, he noticed that that there is a church in Canada, a registered church, that's actually a bank. You need a mortgage? Go to the church. You want to buy a new car? Go to the church. So he tried to have them changed from church status to bank status. Well, didn't that get a lot of attention from the church? And they made a formal representation that he was being discriminatory. Now, Brian Mulroney, being a prime minister from Quebec, the man who created the NAFTA agreement and impoverished Canadians because no one got a raise after 1985, we're all shut down, we became slaves to the corporation. As the old Rockefeller once said, he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And that's what Brian Mulroney believes in too. He only did one good thing for the people of Canada. I'm watching the clock, I'm sorry, but he had this thing called the Fairness Act for revenue, because revenue agency at that time was just ruthless, and they're paid bonuses to take your money. They can make up stuff about you, and they do. And they continue to do it this day. However, Mr. Mulroney said we have a Fairness Act now, and you will be heard by a panel of people who do not work for Revenue Canada. They are independent, and they are supposed to be unbiased. And it would probably be the only unbiased group in Canada, certainly not a judge, because even here, people like Terry Liberté, a senior lawyer here, he'll say, judges, and he'll tell you this is true, have private meetings without you being there, and you're not alerted to this. And when you get there, the judge has already made up his mind. In fact, this judge was a very famous judge. He was the Attorney General for the province. And he was very clear. He says, I've already made up my mind. At the beginning of the court, I already know what I'm going to do. But they went through the whole process, and the judge rubbed his nose, rubbed his eyes, looked at the clock. Guilty. The defense lawyer, what about all his arguments and all the witnesses he had? Didn't matter. Terry Liberté said this, if I was the lawyer, I would want a transcript of the conversations that happened between the judge and the Crown attorneys before the court trial happened. That didn't happen. That does not happen. We do not do that. Beverly M. McLaughlin thinks our system of justice is a model for the world. The only country I have ever read about that wants the Canadian system of justice is Communist China. They have sent people here to study it, and they're going to mirror it in China, because although it talks a good line, it doesn't walk a good line. You will feel the pain. The Crown will make sure you feel the pain. And by the way, Those Jamaican slaves that belonged to Bridget Ennevor and her family, they were indentured to the crown. And Queen Elizabeth has always said this: I am not apologizing for slavery. Just to be fair with Queen Elizabeth, it's not that I hate the woman, but she is not the rightful heir to the crown. The rightful heir lives in Australia. There was a little problem with the king being cuckolded a few years ago, and an illegitimate birth. Somebody had a baby in 10.5 months rather than 9. Any nurses out there knows they're laughing like, oh my God, 10.5 months, yeah. It's like going to Vietnam, your girlfriend's not pregnant. 4 years later you come back and she's got 3 kids and they're all his. Anyway, that's the way things go. I'm sorry to make the little stupid joke about it. I've got to get off now. I wanted to get this in, but anyway, Bridget Ennevor does not belong to be in this country. She should not be here at all. And if she has any assets, she has caused me great pain. I have been ostracized by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They were very happy to get my work done, very happy to get it done. It was never done before. It was even dangerous. I've been at gunpoint twice by First Nations people in that fishery, and they've swept it all under the rug. Just keep working. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. When you got a rifle on your chest from a First Nations guy who eventually the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, fish cops we used to call them, they took his guns away, all of them, because somebody's going to get shot. Now, First Nations people have special status in Canada. They can buy guns up to .50 caliber. They can buy bullets. They don't need a license. Nobody else in Canada can do this. They are the only group. Even though our Constitution says all Canadians are equal, that's not true. That's not even remotely true. We do not have equality in Canada. Our new Prime Minister wants women first, women first, women first. He wants them to be equals to everybody. Well, when I was a biologist at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, there were more women biologists. This is 1994, 95. There were more women biologists than there were men. By one. I counted them. By one. Anyway. Interestingly enough, they all seem to be married to somebody in the department. Strangely enough. I'm getting off now. Thank you all for listening to me. I'm running out of time. I'll talk again, I hope, unless the police come to shake me down. And they might. I'll be keeping my knees together. Everybody have a good day. Bye now.